Welcome back to Learning with us here at MPB. I am Miss Killen. We are diving into this new unit of working with quadratics. We are on lesson 2, which is the nature of the zeros of quadratic equations and functions. We're looking at A REI for B. I can use the discriminant to determine the nature of solutions of a quadratic function. All right, now, you're sitting there in your chair and you're going, what's a discriminant? So, I'm going to tell you. It's a new word for us, it's a new vocabulary word, and it's not one that you hear much. So let's look and see what a discriminant is. It says, what's a discriminant? It's part of the quadratic formula that's under the square root symbol, and it tells us how many roots or how many solutions there are. Now, Ms. Killen, what are you talking about under the square root symbol? Now, we all know that I have great singing voice, so I'm going to remind us about what the discriminant is. Do we remember our quadratic formula? Opposite of b plus or minus, let's take the square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So what I'm looking at is what's under that square root sign. It's the discriminant. All right, so let's see. I'm going to write it up here and see what this looks like. So here's my quadratic function, or excuse me, my quadratic formula, opposite of b plus or minus, and then here is my discriminant. Remember when I told y'all just go ahead and plug that in your calculator so we can have it pretty under that that square root sign? That's what I was telling you to find, was to find the discriminant. Now, that discriminant tells us a lot. It says that if that under the square root sign is bigger than 0, I have 2 solutions. If what's under the square root sign equals 0, I have 1 solution. And if what's under the square root is smaller than 0, I don't have any solutions. Well, what's smaller than 0? Negative numbers. And we have yet come to the portion of the program where we can find the square root of negative numbers, because we can't. Then you get into your imaginary numbers. We're not there yet. So let's look and see what we got. Let's use this equation to see an example of the nature of the zeros. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to label them A, B, and C. I'm going to remind myself of what I'm doing with that formula. Opposite of b plus or minus, let's take the square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so let's go ahead and plug this in. Opposite of b, 4 plus or minus, let's take the square root. Negative 4 squared minus 4 times a times c, and that's all over 2 times 1. Now, at this point, I would have told you back in our other unit, go ahead and pretty that up under the square root. So let's do that. Plug this into your calculator, just like it is, with parentheses and all. Negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 4. And what do you get? I get that. Now, Ms. Killen, you can't take the square root of 0. Oh, but you can. Pick up your calculators. Put square root symbol, 0, and enter. And what you get? You get 0, because 0 times 0 is what? 0. So then I have 4 plus 0 over 2. Or 4 minus 0 over 2. And what do you get? I get 4 over 2, and I get 4 over 2. Well, what do you know 4 over 2? Exactly. It's a whole 2. So that means I have 1 root, which is 2. My discriminant helped me understand that, because my discriminant equaled 0. And what did that other slide or on the other page tell us? That when my discriminant equals 0, how many roots do I got? I just have the 1. So that means it would touch 1, 2, 3. It would look something similar to that. That's what it would look like. So if I put x squared minus 4x plus 4 into my calculator, my graph would look something similar to that. All right? So where does the parabola intersect our x value? Right here, where we said at 2, 0, and it only does once. What does the quadratic formula look like? We remember opposite of b plus or minus. Let's take the square root. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I hate to tell you, but until the end of the course, I'm going to sing that song. That's the only way that I can remember it. Ms. Killen, why? Because I have used that tool to help me remember. Now, obviously, when you're taking your test or doing your problems, you can't sing it out loud, but you can sing it in your head. That's just another way that we can use the information we've gotten to help us with these problems. All right, so let's click on. It says, let's try one and see if we can answer these questions, all right? Remember, the discriminant tells a lot of information about these graphs. All right, so it says, f of x equals x squared plus 6x plus 8. First, solve for the solution. Next, check your answer you got with either Desmos or your calculator. It wants us to find out what the discriminant tells us and what is your solution or solutions. So I am going to write down my formula, opposite of b plus or minus. Let's take the square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'm going to label a, b, and c. Now let's plug these in. So I've got negative 6 plus or minus. Let's take the square root. 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times a positive 8 over 2. In your calculator, this is where I tell you, go ahead and plug that 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 8 in and see what you get. Exactly right. So let's see. Let's write that down. Negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 4 over 2. Now, we know what the square root of 4 is. That's a perfect square. What's the square root of 4? It's 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 6 and add and subtract 2 divided by 2. Let's write that. Negative 6 plus 2 divided by 2. Negative 6 minus 2 divided by 2. So when I have negative 6 plus 2 divided by 2, I get negative 4 over 2, which is a negative 2. Negative 6 minus 2 divided by 2, I get negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. So my two solutions are negative 4, negative 2. That is how I find my solutions. Now, 4 is what compared to 0? It's bigger. So do you remember on our other page, it said that when my discriminant is larger than 0, I have two solutions. And here's a perfect example of that. Now, Ms. Killen, are you sure we did this right? Go to Desmos. So let's go ahead and plug this in. I'm going to put x squared plus 6x plus 8. Negative 4, negative 2. It shows me right there that I did the math correctly. Good job. Let's go to our next one. Now it says let's do some practice about this one. Use the following quadratic formula to solve for the zeros. Use the 3 ways that we've learned. Ms. Killen, what are you talking about, 3 ways we've learned? Now, we've learned how to factor. We've learned how to do perfect squares or differences. And now we've got our quadratic formula. So we have 3 different ways. I'm going to use the quadratic formula just because I like singing the song. So here we go. I've got opposite of b plus or minus. Let's take the square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'm labeling a, b, and c. So I've got opposite of b plus or minus. Let's take the square root, b squared minus 4 times a times c all over negative 2. Go ahead and pretty that discriminant up. Put everything that's under that square root sign in your calculator and see what you get. Let's see. Negative 6 plus or minus the square root of negative 8 over negative 2. Now, stop. What did that other page tell us when our discriminant is less than 0? Because remember, we made a big deal about negative numbers are smaller than 0. What did it tell us about our roots and about our zeros when our discriminant is smaller than 0? I don't have any. Ms. Killen, are you sure? Let's look. I'm going to take Desmos, and I'm going to plug in what we've got. So I have negative x squared plus 6x minus 11. It does not cross anywhere near that x-axis. So it does not have a root at all. So when I got to this point, this negative 8 under that square root symbol, I can put no real solutions. Now, Ms. Killen, why did you put no real solutions? Because as you go further into algebra, we're going to talk about those imaginary numbers. And now I could find an imaginary number, but we're not doing that today. So that's why my answer is no real solutions. All right, let's keep going. This is time for you to master. Use the discriminants to determine how many and what the zeros would be for the following. So pause the video. You or you and your table partner, go ahead and work these two problems, see what you get, and come back. All right, so let's see what Mr. Bird got. I'm going to go ahead and label these A, B, and C. I'm going to write opposite of B plus or minus, let's take the square root, B squared minus 4AC all over 2A. And then I'm going to write. I'm going to do this in a different color. So I've got negative 6 plus or minus the square root, 6 squared minus 4 times A times C, that's a 9, all over 2 times 1 is 2. I plug that into my calculator and pretty it up. And let's see what I get. So I put 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times a negative 9. And I get 72. So I've got negative 6 plus or minus square root of 72 over 2. Now, this is where you had to pull back that information that we learned. Is 72 a perfect square? No. So then I'm going to see if I can maybe factor some things out from under that radical sign. So let's look. 72. So what are some factors of 72? I think the factors that I'm going to use are 9 and 8. Factors of 9 are 3 and 3. Factors of 8 are 2 and 4. Factors of 4 are 2 and 2. Here's a double. Here's a double. And that's what's left under. So I have negative 6 plus or minus. 2 is under my radical. But what do I do with that 2 and the 3 that I pulled outside that radical? I'm going to multiply them together, right? So 3 times 2 is 6 over 2. I can reduce those numbers. I can reduce negative 6, 6, and 2. So negative 6, positive 6, and 2 have 2 in common. So let's reduce. Negative 3 plus or minus 3 square roots of 2. And that is my answer. Check your work, check my work, pull it up on Desmos or the calculator. And this is what you're going to find. Now, Ms. Killen, when I plug it into Desmos, I get an exact. So you'll get approximately a number. But if you put that number and put 3 square roots of 2, you'll get the same thing. Good job. Let's look at number 2. So let's erase some. So still using that formula, I'm going to label A, B, and C. Then I'm going to plug in opposite of B plus or minus the square root B squared minus 4 times A times C over 2 times 1. So I have 8 plus or minus. Now, I'm going to plug that in my calculator just like it is. I'm going to have parentheses negative 8 squared minus 4 times 1 times 20. Oh, I get a negative 16. Well, what do I know happens when my discriminant is a negative or it's less than 1? I don't have any roots. So this has no real solutions. Good job, guys. All right, so let's look. I don't want to forget what a discriminant is and where it is, what it helps me determine. Now, my discriminant is what's under the square root sign, and it helps me determine how many roots I have or how many times it touches or crosses the x-axis. I want to know, and we have to remember how to determine the number of solutions. If it is larger than 0, I have 2. If it equals 0, I have 1. And if it's less than 0, I have no roots whatsoever. My quadratic formula. This formula is used to find my solutions. Opposite of b plus or minus, let's take the square root, b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I'm so glad that you came to learn with us today here at MPB. I want you to have the best day ever.